It's Thursday, and that means it's time for another Throwback Thursday. Joining me today is Lori Kent with the Local Lou podcast.
Good morning.
Good morning. You big ABBA fan?
You know, it's growing on me.
Okay, good. You like the Dancing Queen
Yes,
sometimes.
I do.
How can you not? Come on in.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, what are we talking about today?
Well, we're going to head to Hartford, South Dakota, so just a little west of Sioux Falls, and we're going to look at the historical marker, the town of Hartford. And this isn't going to be the first time, and it's not the last time, where we're going to hear about a history of a town being named for the original people that show up there. So our first settler in the Hartford area, his name is Elihu Increase Oaks, and like at this point you're probably thinking Oaks doesn't sound a lot like Hartford, and that's because Hartford's original name was Oaksville, which I love this idea of like showing up places and settling them and just naming them for yourself. Like I feel like Baileyville, adorable.
I feel like I need that now.
Yeah. Luland, I'm
oh,
here
that
for
would be fun.
Yeah, and then we could do Dowdna City, where the weather is lovely and very well recorded. But you know, what's interesting about this is the town of Hartford is obviously called Hartford, not Oaksville. So like what happened there? And the historical marker goes into explaining that even though the Oaks family were the first settlers in the area, what ends up happening in 1878, they settle the area. In 1879, they're part of that. They are a town that is lucky enough to have the railroad come through, which secures their future. Like they're gonna make it after all. Like it's really exciting. But that also means once the railroad's there, people are able to get there way easier. And so a big group of people come from Hartford, Connecticut, and majority rules. They like the name Hartford. They're going to change Oaksville to Hartford. So that's how we get Hartford, South Dakota. But what's interesting about this is E.I. Oaks, he is remembered incorrectly on the historical marker. It is I.E. Oaks on the historical marker. Some people thought this was a typo, but I actually disagree because I looked at some old newspapers and I found starting in 1949, he is misidentified as I.E. Oaks several times in the retelling of the history. So I think it's more of a historical oopsie-daisies that's lasted a really long time as opposed to a typo on the historical marker. And the historical marker then goes into other pieces of Hartford history where they're talking about two different men from the area that end up serving for the state and territorial legislature. This historical marker located in downtown Hartford, right on their little main street area. It's also right next to a time capsule that's going to be opened in 2089, which is kind of exciting.
Wow.
And this historical marker dates back to 1989, which, you know, is kind of old. Like, I feel like if the historical marker is as old as me, like, you know, like it's fairly old. And so I also feel like it's one of those where you have to double check all the names and dates because historical research has gotten so easy now. You can do it all on your phone and your computer. Things that would take weeks take minutes. So it's easy to find out that the incorrect name was on there. Same thing with a lot of dates. You can double check them and sometimes they're just slightly wrong. And it might just be based on the information they had available at the time. But yeah, so Hartford ends up growing. And so in 2020, their population is 3,300 people. So they really haven't stopped growing. And it feels like every year they're getting bigger and bigger, more new things. And if we were to rewrite that historical marker today, I think there's a lot more we could fit on there. And obviously we want to fix the E.I. Oaks, which every time I say it, like, and maybe it's just because it's kind of musical this morning, but it's like E.I. Oaks.
I was thinking the same thing, Lori.
It is Old McDonald's farm.
I didn't want to, you know, damper the story by saying
totally
that,
true.
but in my head I'm E.I. Oaks.
E.I. Oaks. I mean, the story writes itself.
It kind of does. It's great.
But so E.I., he ends up, you know, not being remembered correctly. He also doesn't get the town name after him. And he was, up until recently, buried in an unmarked grave. However, his family members, luckily in 2020, did get a lovely headstone added. So he will at least be remembered forever in the Hartford Cemetery.
Wow, crazy history.
Yes.
Thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely.
Stick around, we have more after the break.